Warning, this video contains animated content that you may find unsettling or disturbing. Starting now.
Milky, Milky!
Huh? Milky! Baby want Milky!
And egg!
Before we continue, let me just clarify. When I say adult animation, I'm not talking about porn. I mean shows like Family Guy, South Park, Has Been Hotel, Harvey Birdman, Attorney at Law, and the source of this clip right here, Mr. Pickles. Shows that are advertised as being for an adult audience that also happen to be animated. The reason I make this distinction is because when I told my dad I was gonna make this video, look, I just know for a fact some people might confuse the two, and having one very awkward conversation is enough for me, thank you very much. So, just to reiterate, I mean this and not. Now, with that out of the way, let me ask you a question. What makes an animated show adult? We talk about adult animation as if it's a subgenre of animation, but animation is a medium, not a genre.
Animation is cinema?
Kind of like how I hear people talk about YA, young adult fiction novels, which is such a wide variety of content to the point where two YA novels might have almost nothing in common except for the fact that they are categorized as YA. It seems to be used more for advertising rather than to tell you what to expect from the book. And when you look up the definition of adult animation, you can see something similar. However, there are some common elements people point out as being shared between media and adult animation. The official definition I found states that works in this subgenre may explore philosophical, political, or social issues.
Dad!
Stan, you came back. Does that mean you learned the importance of voting?
I learned that I'd better get used to having to pick between a douche and a turd sandwich because it's usually the choice I'll have.
He's going to vote!
And contains profane language.
When I'm lonely, I become hungry. And when I become hungry, I want to choke on that red of yours. Your and lick all of your before taking out your and with more teeth until you're screaming like a fucking baby.
Graphic violence, gross and/or dark humor,
Oh my God! She thinks you're our servant because you're black! Yeah, oh man, this is the best day of my miserable life. Sweet! I love racism!
and sexual content both suggestive and explicit.
So, do you have any thoughts on what you might want to do tonight?
Oh, I don't know.
Plus some drugs and alcohol to add to the mix. But here's the problem. Isn't a lot of this stuff in regular animation too? Now, hear me out. I was watching the first season of Mr. Pickles for this video. Some of the character designs in this show have always made me feel uncomfortable. But I didn't want to put it into this video and judge it without ever watching it. So I watched it, and in one episode a dude's face got ripped off. And it was unsettling and uncomfortable, and I kept thinking, this would never happen in a regular cartoon. But then, memories started to resurface. Of SpongeBob. There's a lot of face ripping going on in this show. These are just a few examples. It was at this point, more and more memories began to resurface, and I began to spiral. Nickelodeon, most of their shows are filled with gross out humor. Their logo is literal slime. And it's not just Nickelodeon. Cartoon Network had stuff like Mad TV, Courage the Cowardly Dog, The Misadventures of Flapjack. And don't worry, Disney's not innocent either. Who here remembers the Buzz on Maggie? If you don't know, The Buzz on Maggie is a show about the life of a teenage fly girl. Fly girl. Fly. You mean those things that...
Flies barf. That's right, we barf. And I don't know about the rest of you, but I see a world where flies can't barf at dim/banquets is not a world I want to be a part of. I am a fly.
I am a fly!
I am a fly. I am a fly. My no shoes!
So, some of you are probably like, we already knew cartoons were gross. That's not proof. Well then, let me give you exhibits B through D then. Graphic violence. I'm sure many of you would argue that this is another obvious one, so I won't go too deep into it, except to show you this one clip from Samurai Jack. Yeah, we know what's being implied here. Speaking of implied, it's not hard to find results when you look up adult jokes in kids' cartoons. Daddy's Trophy from Dexter's Laboratory does not lie. Implied sex jokes are very prevalent. And what about the tackling of political, philosophical, and social issues? Literally, all of that is just the movie Zootopia. Tell me this movie is not about prejudice, discrimination, and racism. And also thirsting on Judy Hopps. But that's an entirely different video that I have no intention of ever making. My eyes are open. I see the truth that all others ignore. None of these things are what make adult animation different from regular animation. Then, what does? I don't know. This is where I lost the thread, and when I tried to find a new direction, all I could see in front of me was the culprit that started my spiral, Mr. Pickles. And so I started trying to figure out, why do people watch shows like Mr. Pickles? Like I said, I didn't like the show. It always felt like a landmark example of a lot of things I disliked in adult animation. But after the revelation of my own hypocrisy, I thought I should look at it again with a more open mind. So I finished the first season, and I think I get why people watch it. Don't get me wrong, it's still not my favorite thing. But I get it. The answer is pretty simple, actually. The reason people watch Mr. Pickles is the same reason I watched all the Saw movies on Netflix. I didn't watch them to see some groundbreaking story or to fall in love with the characters. No, I was there for one thing specifically, the traps. With each movie, I was thinking, all right, what's this new thing they're gonna put someone in? Who's gonna
Live or die.
Well, in the case of Mr. Pickles, they have this gross imagery, these super gnarly weird kills, and while I didn't love it all the time, I couldn't help thinking with each episode, okay, what crazy thing is Mr. Pickles gonna do next? Which in hindsight makes sense, because there are plenty of people who will read a story just because it has a specific story trope or a character archetype that they enjoy. That's like a majority of what's on webtoons. I'm surprised it took me this long to figure this out, seeing as I'm one of those types of people who see the tag isekai and immediately go to read the synopsis. That's right, I love isekai. I love all the dumb tropes, the video gamey power systems, and the overpowered main characters that are boring as white bread. I love white bread. Get that everything bagel out of my face. I watched Everything Everywhere all at once. I'm not getting near that shit. What I'm trying to say is, Mr. Pickles is niche, but it's a niche that I have to acknowledge has an audience. And I think that's true for a lot of adult animated shows. I mean, just look at Big Mouth. People complained about that show throughout its entire run, and yet it still got 8 seasons. Look, I'm not trying to say there isn't any objectively bad adult animation, but the loud minority on social media has taught me to assume that the internet isn't always the most accurate metric to determine the popularity of something. Obviously, you can't make a perfect show that everyone loves, but I think the problem is that no one has explicitly stated what content they want to see. So, what do I think current audiences want from adult animation? Well, I think we're kind of already getting it. Shows like Castlevania and Arcane, people want more serious content with overarching narratives. Adult animation should 100% be allowed to tackle more serious topics and not feel the need to pull out at the last second. That's why I think BoJack Horseman got so popular.
What happened, BoJack?
Same thing that always happens. You didn't know me. Then you fell in love with me. And now you know me.
You know, it's funny. When you look at someone through rose-colored glasses, all the red flags just look like flags.
I'm not saying there should be no jokes whatsoever, but telling every joke that you can think of and making fun of every group you can, eventually, no one's gonna laugh with you anymore. Well, that's not exactly true. There is a split between people who watch adult animation. Those who take animation as a medium seriously, and those who don't. Those who take animation seriously, I'm absolutely certain want more layered narratives. While those who don't take animation seriously, which unfortunately is still a sizable enough group where their opinion still matters, have no issue with the status quo and would prefer for things to never change. They think animation is silly and childish, and when an animated series tries to be something else, they won't even give it a chance. How did this divide come to be? Well, I could cite a bunch of different reasons. Old Hanna-Barbera cartoons, Disney, censorship, but I think the real issue encompasses all these things and more. It's the reason I couldn't answer the very first question I presented to you all. Because how am I supposed to know what makes an animated show adult when no one can ever agree on what does it even mean to be an adult? If it was just about age, why do we put so much weight on it? I've thought about this question since I was a kid, and I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one. Think about it. Everyone as a child has imagined at least once what it would be like to be an adult.
I could be a football player, or a king, or a spaceman.
And I'm pretty sure most of us, myself included, didn't imagine we would be where we are now.
Next time you see me, this town will be eating out of the palm of my hand. Spare change. Spare change, ma'am.
The only thing people seem to be certain about is that if you are an adult, then that means you're not a child. And because of this thought, the idea was born that if you do things that children do, then you're a child. Which at a certain age, i.e. you become a teenager, being seen as a child is the last thing you want. We become way more sensitive to our environment, more aware of society and how we're viewed. Some people do their best to meld into society, while others try to fight against it. In either case, the preconceived ideas of society, of your family and friends, impacts how you view the world. Because if they never explain anything, then the best anyone can do is just watch the people around them and make decisions based on what they see, leading to people who, even after becoming adults, still think they need to fight to prove so. That's the craziest thing about this. People will still try to judge you for things they view as childish. But the problem is, the metric for what is childish or not is so vague. Is it eating candy, soda, and junk food? Staying up late? Are you trying to tell me that switching from watching animated Transformers to watching the live-action Transformer movies is some kind of leap from child to adult? Because I don't buy it. Is being an adult just listening to what society says? No. Society is constantly changing, constantly fighting itself. No one can ever agree on anything, even people who are supposedly part of the same groups. I personally think there are really only 3 things that separate an adult from a child. Just 3. An adult has more experience, more responsibilities, and less protection. That's it. The amounts of each may vary in level from person to person, but pretty much these are the only differences. Because yeah, becoming an adult doesn't mean you immediately have all the answers. Really, it's just living and experiencing life. It has nothing to do with a superficial, unclear idea like abandoning childish things. Don't believe me, a random YouTuber with only 3 videos and less than 100 subscribers to his name? What about a famous and well-established author? Check it. C.S. Lewis quote, the guy who wrote Narnia. The quote says this: "Critics who treat adult as a term of approval, instead of as a merely descriptive term, cannot be adult themselves. To be concerned about being grown up, to admire the grown up because it is grown up, to blush at the suspicion of being childish, these things are the marks of childhood and adolescence. And in childhood and adolescence they are, in moderation, healthy symptoms. Young things ought to want to grow. But then into middle life, or even into early manhood, this concern about being adult is a mark of really arrested development. When I was 10, I read fairy tales in secret and would have been ashamed if I had been found doing so. Now that I am 50, I read them openly. When I became a man, I put away childish things, including the fear of childishness and the desire to be very grown up. So, where do we go from here? I would love to say things are getting better. There are so many shows being made that wouldn't have existed 10 years ago. And while they don't seem to last long, it's still progress, right? Look, if I had more concrete answers, maybe it wouldn't have taken me 2 years to write the script and make this video. I was originally gonna make this another video about all the bad things in adult animation. And I was gonna present a formula on how to make the perfect adult animated series. Very YouTuber coded of me, I know. But the more I researched, the more I realized things weren't as simple as I initially believed. It's kind of poetic, actually. The older I've gotten, the more I've had to deal with problems that didn't have simple answers. Things don't always conclude with a happy ending, but we keep moving forward regardless, because that's a part of life. And I would love to see that represented more in adult animation. Thanks for watching. I don't know if I'm gonna make another video on this channel. Part of me wants to, but with how difficult this one was, I don't know. We'll see. Regardless, have a good morning, noon, or night, and oh, wait, I almost forgot. I had one more question, and I want your help with it. This isn't about boosting the algorithm, it's just something I'm genuinely trying to figure out. What kind of merchandise would you buy from an adult animated franchise? One of the biggest reasons I've seen for shows getting canceled is because they don't make back their investment. I've always been partial to graphic tees myself, but what other kinds of interesting merch do you think would sell well? Let me know in the comments. All right. I don't know how to end this video.